feel like there's just so many examples of this happening within the past few years that I could probably list off a handful of them, which I will right now. Very recently, as in like within the past few hours of recording this, a developer of a game called, I think it was Homicipher. Please do correct me on that. Homicipher has dropped development of the game. They'll be finishing, I think, the endings of the game and a little bit more of it, but they are planning to drop development on it completely because of their treatment by their fan base. And even in just this year also, we have Yelocre Clown, who was responsible for Welcome Home, I'm pretty sure. There's just so many examples of this as of late, where a bunch of different creatives who happen to gain a lot of popularity tend to become very overwhelmed by that and then have to take a step back for a while. And this has just become such a common thing in particularly small fandom spaces that grow large in a very short period of time. This isn't limited to just the mentioned examples that I had, but I feel like it's just become so much more prevalent, and I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit, so that's what this video is for. And I think first and foremost, a lot of the issues arise with these. The biggest one that I think I've talked about a little bit in past videos is parasocial relationships, and by that it can mean a bunch of different things depending on the person. Sometimes it can be somebody who started out as a small fan and then becomes extremely hate-filled, particularly when the fandom gets larger and there's newer fans. So they'll kind of be nostalgia trippers or gatekeepers that are like, oh, these new fans, blah, 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 and I was here since day one, blah, 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 right? So there's a lot of superiority they feel for knowing that particular creative first. And I can understand the difficulty of having an influx of people, but to be gatekeeping a fandom is a little bit bizarre, and it's to the detriment of the creative and the artist. So I don't really understand it at that point. But that's just one of the ways parasocial relationships sort of implement themselves into growing fandoms. There's also a lot of idolization, and I've talked about the issues with that and how it damages both the fan and the artist themselves. It's just not healthy, and you kind of have to keep your idolization separate from the person in many cases, because again, you do not know that person does not know you. And as much as you can support that artist and want to see them grow, you still have to keep that resonant distance. And in many cases, that boundary is overstepped a lot in very recent fandom culture. And I feel like there's also a lot of disregard for artist boundaries as a whole. For example, when I think about what happened with the Welcome Home fandom and the treatment of the artist behind that, there was very specific boundaries and rules that they set in place regarding the characters. I think there was a no NSFW rule, a safety rule, everything. And every single one of those set in boundaries was broken to the point that they were they kind of just dropped all of those. And it's frustrating. And I think in the case of another fandom that I wasn't particularly involved in, but I think it was Sprunky, that one Incredibox mod. That developer, similarly to the artist behind Welcome Home, both of them have gotten doxxed at some point, and that led to a loss of stuff or the exposure of their home, which is absolutely insane. And I think that's common sense that is a crazy thing to do to people over the internet. And there's just so many cases of fans or dislikers alike sort of breaking that boundary and then putting people in genuine danger or causing genuine harm. it's beyond me, and I don't really understand why this has become such a normal thing within this past 2 years. I don't know. I feel like this one is a teetering, tottering sort of thing because it happens to some fandoms, it doesn't happen to some, particularly ones that have more child audiences. This tends to happen to a lot, especially in the cases of indie projects or very small artist projects. They tend to be taken and sort of, I don't really know the word for it, bastardized by YouTube content farms. And if you know anything about the way that YouTube content farms basically run their accounts and their channels, they're making the worst type of content. And I think to watch passion projects be sort of stripped and brought to that sort of level is so disheartening. It's crazy. And again, I feel like that's not particularly prevalent in many of these cases. Ones that have a larger or older demographic typically don't have to deal with that issue, but definitely on the child-oriented fan bases or projects that tend to have younger audiences, there tends to be a lot of different content being made like that. I think my last thing that upsets me the most is, I guess, the way that these projects are treated in comparison to larger companies with obviously a lot more money to spare. I think the biggest thing is they need to stop treating these individual indie projects that have basically little to no funding and are purely passion projects to the same level as multi-billion-dollar companies with money to spare, because they are not in any way similar to whatever. And these teams are really small, if there's teams at all. And again, a lot of this is run because of creators' passions for characters or storytelling or whatever they're trying to do, and they're funneling that into whatever media they're creating for the people. And it's great to have people enjoy what you pump out, but at some point that garnered attention can be turned so terribly. And I think in the case of Homocypher recently, there was just an influx of negativity. There was more criticism than there were praise or kindness being generated, and that completely overwhelmed the creator, and that's one of the many reasons that they stepped down from the project completely. And that's just crazy to me, because you're literally pushing the creators out of their own projects because they can't handle the toxicity of people within their fan base. I don't exactly know how this has gotten to the extent it has, where so many different projects have this same exact slope, where a person is pumping something out and it has a small fan base, but it's still doing relatively well. Something makes it really big, and then there's an influx of people who are now fans of this. But with that comes a large amount of people who don't exactly take that indie project for what it is, which is, an independent project. And then, of course, a lot of the creators get overwhelmed and then end up either leaving the project, taking a long-form hiatus, leaving a whole platform, because Yellow Cray, they were literally drived off of their own platform, which was TikTok at the time. First off, that's already a crazy thing to do to a person that's literally pumping out the stuff that you enjoy, and you become so distasteful to the point where they literally leave the platform. It's just beyond me, because this is just such a common thing now, or at least it's happening so much more often to independent artists and creatives, that I feel like it just kind of needs to be said that you guys treat these individual artists and passion projects like they're the same thing as multi-billion-dollar companies or million-dollar companies with teams, writers, character designers, all that stuff. That's never going to be the same as a small run project, usually done by one person. I don't know. I just feel like as of recently, there's so many similar instances, and a lot of these have been happening in 1 year. 3 of the examples I've mentioned, that being Yellowcray, Sprunky, and Homocypher, have all happened within just this year. And one of which literally happened less than 24 hours as of the time of recording. I don't know if anyone else kind of noticed this pattern similarly in the ways that I have, but this also feels like it plays into the way that a lot of people complain about fandom culture not being the same anymore. Like, oh yeah, fandom culture is different, trends just die out so much faster, and fandoms seem to disappear off of the face of the earth after the first week. This is the reason why. And I know I sound very angry doing this, but I can understand the frustration, I guess, of watching something that you've poured your heart and soul into and finally made a big break and then are getting more people into it, and then watching everything that you've pushed and worked hard on be bastardized by not only your dislikers but your fans all the same. And then you also have to think about your personal safety at this point, because there's so many instances of people being doxxed. That's insane. I don't know. I feel like it's such a disheartening thing, because I think it drives away a lot of really talented creatives from being able to show their art or have that push to do it, because of instances like this where things go haywire and south really fast. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. This was really angry. I feel like I'm not usually this angry about things, but this one got me. If you have anything that you'd like to say on this, or you have any similar recollections of this type of thing happening within fandom culture, I'd like to hear it. Of course, if you have any contradictory opinions, I'd also like to hear it and talk about it in the comments. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out. Bye.